The avoidant engaged in betrayal behaviors during the relationship, believing betrayal would remain cost-free or that costs would be minimal and manageable, believing they could maintain you as a primary source of stability and support while simultaneously pursuing other options, believing they could violate relationship agreements without facing permanent consequences to their comfortable position, believing their defended minimization of betrayal significance would prevent you from implementing boundaries that would cost them access to what you provided. The betrayal manifested through specific behaviors constituting violation of relationship agreements and violation of your trust, manifested through maintaining active connections with ex-partners, suggesting ongoing romantic or sexual possibility, through pursuing new interests while in a committed relationship with you, through emotional affairs where they shared intimacy with others that should have been reserved for the primary partnership, through sexual infidelity, violating agreements about exclusivity, through deception about their activities and connections, concealing behaviors they knew would violate boundaries you established. The avoidance belief that betrayal would remain cost-free stemmed from their experience in the relationship, where your extensive patience and accommodation taught them that violations of boundaries generated temporary consequences, followed by your eventual forgiveness and restored access. They learned through pattern that when they violated agreements, you would express hurt, yet would ultimately accept explanations or promises rather than implementing permanent consequences. Learned that your boundaries were flexible, negotiable positions rather than firm standards. Learned that emotional expressions of remorse without behavioral change proved sufficient to restore their comfortable position without them having to actually address patterns or honor commitments. This learned belief that betrayal costs could be managed through performance of remorse created confidence. They could continue pursuing their defended comfortable position, including maintaining options and connections outside the primary relationship, without facing the ultimate cost of permanently losing you and losing all essential functions your presence provided. Yet the betrayal created consequences the avoidant did not anticipate. It created your definitive departure. Implementing boundaries that were not negotiable or temporary, but were permanent protection against continued violation, created the loss of all functions you provided that their defended life structure depended upon without them recognizing dependence until functions were removed. It created visibility of patterns to others who witnessed betrayal and recognized avoidance character in ways that damaged their reputation and their future relationship prospects. It created internal consequences where facing their own capacity for betrayal damaged their self-concept and generated shame their defended psychology cannot effectively manage. The unanticipated consequences accumulate, creating life deterioration the avoidant never imagined betrayal would generate. Never imagined because defended minimization prevented them from accurately assessing what losing you would cost. Never imagined because they assumed you would continue tolerating as you had tolerated previous violations. Never imagined because their defended psychology could not perceive the extent to which their equilibrium depended on your sacrifice until sacrifice was withdrawn, leaving them facing the full weight of consequences their betrayal deserved. Yet their defended expectations assumed they would avoid through your continued accommodation. They assumed your forgiveness was unlimited, discovering too late it had boundaries they finally crossed. The avoidant developed a specific belief throughout the relationship that your forgiveness was essentially an unlimited resource they could continuously draw upon without depleting. Developed through observing that each time they violated your trust or failed to honor commitments, you eventually forgave them and restored the relationship rather than implementing permanent consequences. When they withdrew after promising consistency, you forgave the broken promise and allowed them back when they returned. When they maintained inappropriate connections with ex-partners despite your expressed discomfort, you forgave the boundary violation and continued the relationship, hoping they would eventually prioritize your comfort. When they demonstrated emotional unavailability despite commitments to try harder, you forgave the failed effort and maintained patience, believing improvement would eventually occur. Each instance of forgiveness without permanent consequence taught them that forgiveness was unlimited, taught that violations generated temporary disruption followed by restoration to comfortable position, taught that your boundaries were flexible positions that persistent minimization or adequate performance of remorse could overcome. The learned belief in unlimited forgiveness created a specific, entitled expectation that the pattern would continue indefinitely, regardless of the severity of violations. They expected that betrayal through infidelity or through maintained deceptive connections would follow the same pattern as previous violations. Expected you would express hurt, they would express remorse and provide explanations, minimizing betrayal's significance, and you would eventually forgive, allowing restoration of the relationship and restoration of their access to functions you provided. The expectation felt reasonable based on the established pattern where your forgiveness had consistently materialized despite their continued pattern of violations. Felt reasonable because they had learned through experience that your love and your commitment exceeded your boundaries, that your hope for relationship improvement exceeded your willingness to protect yourself from continued violations, that your investment in the relationship exceeded your standards for adequate reciprocal treatment. Yet your forgiveness had boundaries they finally crossed through betrayal, proving more significant than previous violations. The boundaries existed not as arbitrary lines, but as natural limits of your capacity to tolerate violations while maintaining your worth and your well-being. Existed as the point where continued forgiveness would constitute such profound self-abandonment that your integrity required you to protect yourself through definitive ending rather than through continued hope. That person demonstrating through sustained pattern, including ultimate betrayal, that they would not change despite unlimited forgiveness. The crossed boundary manifested through your response, differing qualitatively from previous responses to violations, manifested through immediate implementation of no contact rather than through expression of hurt, followed by eventual reconnection. Manifested through definitive statements that the relationship was over rather than through processing that left the door open for restoration. Manifested through your maintained resolve despite their attempts to restore the previous pattern through performance of remorse. The discovery that forgiveness had limits came too late for the avoidant to prevent consequences. Came after betrayal was already committed, after your boundary was already crossed, after your definitive decision was already made to protect yourself, rather than continue forgiving violations that proved, through culmination in betrayal, that patterns would never change regardless of how many times you forgave, hoping forgiveness would eventually motivate genuine change. The too late discovery creates a specific crisis where the avoidant faces that they miscalculated catastrophically. Faces that they took for granted the unlimited forgiveness that actually had limits they should have recognized and respected. Faces that they assumed the pattern of violation, forgiveness, and restoration would continue when actually the pattern was building toward your eventual limit, beyond which forgiveness transformed from generous second chances into self-destructive enabling, requiring you to choose yourself over continued relationship with a person whose betrayal proved definitively they did not value the relationship enough to honor basic agreements or to protect your trust. Understanding that forgiveness had boundaries reveals the avoidant's fundamental miscalculation about your character and your limits. They interpreted your previous forgiveness as weakness or as unlimited tolerance, suggesting you would accept any violation, interpreted wrongly because forgiveness stemmed from strength and hope rather than from weakness, stemmed from generosity rather than from unlimited tolerance, stemmed from belief in their potential rather than from acceptance that violations would continue indefinitely. Your forgiveness was a gift they mistook for entitlement. Was a gift you gave hoping it would support their growth, hoping it would communicate safety to lower defenses, hoping it would provide chances to demonstrate changed capacity. Yet they treated the gift as entitlement, treated it as confirmation you would always forgive rather than treating it as a precious offering requiring reciprocal respect and honor. The betrayal proved they viewed forgiveness as weakness to exploit rather than as a gift to treasure. proved through them violating trust, confident you would forgive as always, rather than honoring trust and respecting that forgiveness had limits that betrayal would finally exceed, costing them everything your presence provided. They assumed unlimited forgiveness would continue providing, regardless of how severely they violated agreements. Unlimited forgiveness was never meant to excuse. The betrayal destroyed their credibility with everyone who witnessed your patience with their patterns. The avoidance relationship with you existed within a broader social context where friends, family, and mutual acquaintances observed relationship dynamics over time, observed your exceptional patience with their patterns, observed your continued investment despite their inadequate reciprocation, observed your forgiveness of violations and your maintenance of hope despite evidence patterns would continue. This social context developed a specific narrative about the relationship where observers recognized you as an exceptionally tolerant, understanding partner, while recognizing the avoidant as fortunate to have someone willing to accommodate their defended limitations so extensively. The observers may have privately questioned whether you were tolerating too much, may have worried your patience enabled rather than helped the avoidant, may have wondered why you continued accepting treatment falling below standards most people would require, may have hoped you would eventually establish boundaries protecting yourself from patterns they observed creating harm despite your generous accommodation. When betrayal occurred and became known to the social context, the betrayal destroyed the avoidant's credibility completely in the eyes of everyone who had witnessed your patience. The destruction occurred through betrayal, proving that avoidance patterns were worse than observers had understood, proving the avoidant was not just a defended, wounded person struggling with intimacy, but was a person capable of deliberate deception and violation of a partner who had demonstrated extraordinary patience and understanding. The betrayal particularly destroyed credibility because observers had witnessed how much you tolerated, had witnessed withdrawal, inconsistency, emotional unavailability, yet had also witnessed you continuing to invest and continuing to forgive and continuing to maintain hope. The contrast between your demonstrated patience and the avoidance response of betraying a patient partner created universal condemnation from the social context, who recognized that if someone as understanding and forgiving as you could not prevent betrayal through your exceptional patience, then betrayal reflected the avoidant's fundamental character problems rather than reflecting relationship difficulties that a better partner could have prevented. The destroyed credibility manifested through specific social consequences the avoidant did not anticipate. Friends who had tolerated the avoidant because of you now established distance or ended friendships, recognizing the avoidant's betrayal, revealed a character they did not want associated with their own lives. Family members who had hoped you would improve the avoidant through your patience now recognized that improvement was never going to occur and communicated their loss of respect for the avoidant who had betrayed an exceptional partner. Mutual acquaintances who had observed relationship dynamics now viewed the avoidant as a cautionary tale, viewed as a person who had an exceptional partner, yet destroyed the relationship through betrayal, proving they were not capable of appreciating or reciprocating genuine love and commitment. The social consequences accumulated, creating isolation where the avoidant lost not only you, but also lost the broader support network whose tolerance of the avoidant had depended on your presence mediating their relationships and whose condemnation of betrayal eliminated their willingness to maintain connections with a person who betrayed someone universally recognized as having been an extraordinarily patient and forgiving partner. The destroyed credibility also created permanent reputation damage affecting the avoidant's future relationship prospects. Potential new partners who learn about betrayal from mutual connections recognize that if the avoidant betrayed someone as patient and understanding as you, then the avoidant will likely betray them as well, regardless of how perfectly they try to meet avoidance needs. Recognize that betrayal of an exceptionally tolerant partner proves the problem stems from the avoidant's character rather than from partner's inadequacy, creating a permanent warning sign that informed people will not overlook. The reputation damage particularly affects the avoidant's ability to attract quality partners. Affects because people with healthy boundaries and self-respect recognize betrayal of a patient partner as a red flag indicating a person to avoid. Affects because the avoidant's defended attempts to minimize betrayal or to blame relationship circumstances are contradicted by witnesses who observed your exceptional patience, making minimization and blame shifting obviously dishonest attempts to avoid accountability. Understanding that betrayal destroyed credibility reveals unanticipated social costs beyond losing you directly. The avoidant assumed betrayal was a private matter between you and them, assumed that if they could manage your response through performance of remorse, then consequences would be contained to relationship dynamics between you. Yet betrayal occurred within a social context that had observed your patience, making betrayal visible evidence of avoidance character that the social context universally condemned. The condemnation created isolation, reputation damage, and future relationship obstacles the avoidant never anticipated when engaging in betrayal, confident they could manage consequences through the familiar pattern of your eventual forgiveness. Never anticipated that betrayal would destroy not just the relationship with you, but would destroy their standing in the entire social network, whose tolerance depended on your presence and whose judgment of betrayal proves permanent damage to the avoidant's credibility and reputation, affecting their life far beyond the direct loss of the relationship. They assumed they could restore through adequate performance once you discovered violations. They had engaged, confident your unlimited forgiveness would again materialize, preventing permanent consequences. Their betrayal ultimately generated a reality where they can't find anyone else willing to tolerate their patterns while providing what you provided. The avoidant attempts to replace you after betrayal and subsequent ending. Discovers that finding a replacement proves impossible because you represented a unique combination of exceptional qualities that is statistically rare and probably unreplicable. You possessed a specific depth of psychological understanding about defended patterns, allowing you to interpret their behaviors charitably rather than condemning. Possessed knowledge about attachment theory and about how childhood wounds create adult limitations that prevented you from taking their patterns personally or viewing patterns as intentional cruelty rather than as defended protection. You demonstrated exceptional patience, tolerating patterns across extended time that would have ended most relationships within weeks or months, demonstrated through continuing to invest despite inadequate reciprocation, through forgiving violations repeatedly, through maintaining hope for improvement despite evidence patterns persisted unchanged. You provided essential functions that maintained their defended equilibrium, provided emotional regulation, helping them manage feelings they could not manage independently, provided understanding that made them feel known in ways defended isolation prevents, provided consistent presence that buffered them from loneliness their patterns create, provided accommodation that allowed them to maintain a defended, comfortable position without facing consequences patterns would normally generate. This combination of understanding, patience, essential functions, and willingness to sacrifice yourself for the relationship is exceptionally rare, is a combination that perhaps only emerges in people with a specific psychology, including fixer-healer orientation, codependent patterns, or profound capacity for compassion that exceeds healthy self-protection, creating a person willing to tolerate extensive inadequacy, hoping their sacrifice supports the partner's eventual growth. New partners the avoidant pursues lack this rare combination, creating constant dissatisfaction and failed replacement attempts. New partners possess normal, healthy boundaries, establishing consequences for patterns much earlier than you established consequences. Established by ending the relationship within months when patterns prove intolerable rather than continuing for years, hoping patterns will improve. Established by requiring genuine reciprocity rather than accepting minimal effort. Established by protecting themselves from violations rather than forgiving repeatedly, hoping forgiveness facilitates change. New partners lack your psychological understanding, interpreting patterns as character flaws or as intentional mistreatment, rather than charitably understanding patterns as defended responses to wounds. Lack of understanding makes them less tolerant of inadequacy, less patient with violations, less willing to accommodate limitations you accommodated extensively. New partners cannot provide the essential functions you provided because providing those functions required your specific combination of emotional intelligence, regulatory capacity, and willingness to sacrifice yourself in a helper role. New partners will not serve as an external emotional regulation system because healthy partners require emotional reciprocity rather than functioning as a therapist substitute providing one-directional regulatory support. New partners will not accommodate defended limitations because healthy partners establish standards requiring adequate partnership rather than adjusting expectations downward, accepting inadequacy. New partners will not sacrifice themselves hoping to facilitate avoidance growth because healthy partners recognize that sacrificing self for a partner who refuses therapeutic work enables avoidance rather than supports genuine healing. The inability to find an adequate replacement creates a crisis where the avoidant faces that you were an irreplaceable person whose loss represents a permanent cost rather than a temporary setback that finding a new person could resolve. The crisis manifests through them cycling through relationship attempts that fail because new partners either establish boundaries quickly, recognizing patterns, or because new partners lack the qualities that made you exceptional, creating dissatisfaction that prevents the avoidant from fully investing. Each failed attempt reinforces recognition that you were unique, reinforces through comparison, showing new partners lack your understanding, lack your patience, lack your willingness to provide functions, lack the combination of qualities that made the relationship with you feel comfortable despite your eventual boundary enforcement that betrayal triggered. The reinforced recognition generates regret and obsession with you as the irreplaceable person they lost through betrayal they assumed would remain cost-free. Based on your previous pattern of unlimited forgiveness, they mistakenly believed would continue despite betrayal finally crossing the limit beyond which forgiveness transformed from a generous gift into self-destructive enabling you chose yourself over through definitive ending. Understanding that no one else will tolerate their patterns while providing what you provided reveals the avoidant's life-ruining miscalculation. They betrayed the person who represented their best chance at a sustained relationship. Betrayed the person whose rare combination of understanding and patience and essential function provision made the relationship sustainable despite their defended inadequacy. Betrayed the person who accommodated patterns most people would not tolerate for an extended period. The betrayal cost them an irreplaceable partner whose loss proves permanent because the statistical rarity of your combination of qualities means finding an equivalent replacement is improbable. Their life is ruined not because betrayal was discovered, but because betrayal cost them the person whose irreplaceable qualities they took for granted, assuming they could betray you and maintain access through your unlimited forgiveness pattern. Took for granted until loss proved you were not replaceable, proved your patience had limits, proved betrayal exceeded those limits, costing them everything you provided that no replacement can adequately replicate, leaving them facing consequences they never imagined betrayal would generate when they engaged in violations, confident your accommodating pattern would continue protecting them from permanent costs. Their character and their choices deserved experiencing. The betrayal revealed their character in ways their defended presentation had concealed. Now they can't hide. The avoidant maintains a specific defended presentation throughout the relationship and throughout social interactions designed to conceal their character flaws and their capacity for behavior falling below acceptable moral standards. The defended presentation emphasized their wounds and their struggles with intimacy, positioning them as a sympathetic figure whose patterns stemmed from childhood trauma rather than from character deficiencies, emphasized to generate compassion and patience from you and from others rather than generating judgment and consequences. The presentation carefully managed what information others accessed about their behaviors, managed through concealing connections with ex-partners, through hiding pursuit of new interests, through deception about activities and communications that would reveal patterns if known, through strategic sharing of their struggles that positioned them as a person working on growth rather than as a person refusing therapeutic work while engaging in violations. The betrayal shattered the defended presentation, revealing their actual character that presentation had concealed. The revelation occurred through betrayal, demonstrating they were capable of deliberate, sustained deception, capable of maintaining lies and concealment across extended time, capable of looking you in the eyes while hiding violations, capable of accepting your trust and your investment while simultaneously violating agreements that trust and investment were based upon. The betrayal revealed a capacity for compartmentalization, where they could present as a committed partner to you while pursuing or maintaining other connections. Revealed an ability to segment their life, maintaining separate realities that contradicted each other, yet that they managed without apparent conscience impact that would normally prevent such sustained duplicity. The betrayal revealed prioritization of their defended desires over your well-being and over relationship agreements. Revealed they valued maintaining options and pursuing attractions more than they valued honoring commitments to a person who had demonstrated exceptional patience and accommodation of their patterns. The revealed character cannot be concealed again now that betrayal made character visible. The avoidant attempts to restore the defended presentation, claiming betrayal was a mistake or was a circumstantial lapse rather than reflecting their fundamental character. Attempts to minimize through explaining they were overwhelmed or confused or that betrayal did not mean what it obviously meant. Yet attempts to restore concealment fail because betrayal provided concrete, irrefutable evidence of character that explanations cannot erase. You witness their capacity for sustained deception, proving they can lie convincingly across extended time. The social context witnessed their betrayal of an exceptionally patient partner, proving their patterns reflect character rather than reflecting relationship circumstances. Future partners learning about betrayal recognize revealed character as a permanent feature rather than as a temporary aberration, because betrayal of an understanding partner proves the problem stems from the betrayer, not from relationship dynamics.